Pandemic defeated America. How did it come to this? A virus 1,000 times smaller than a dust mite has humbled and humiliated the planet's most powerful nation. America has failed to protect its people, leaving them with illness and financial ruin. It has lost its status as a global leader. It is careened between inaction and ineptitude. The breadth and magnitude of its errors are difficult in the moment to truly fathom. The coronavirus pandemic has had unprecedented, widespread impacts on households across America, raising concerns about our ability to weather long-term health and financial harms. In just a few months, the COVID-19 pandemic decimated the U.S. economy. In the first quarter of 2020, growth declined by 5%. In the second quarter, it plummeted by 31.4%, but then rebounded in the third quarter to 33.4%. In April, during the height of the pandemic, retail sales plummeted 16.4% as governors closed non-essential businesses. Furloughed workers sent the number of unemployed to 23 million that month. The United States, population 328 million, has more than 8.1 million confirmed coronavirus cases and more than 219,000 deaths, the most in the world. China, population 1.4 billion, has had fewer than 91,000 confirmed cases and 4,700 confirmed deaths. On Sunday, the United States had 47,637 new cases, compared with 13 in China. The U.S. death rate is about 670 per 1 million people. In China, it's about 3 deaths per 1 million people. China's numbers are probably not entirely accurate, but then neither are ours. The number of American victims is likely much higher than the official figures indicate. The federal debt will increase. On October 1st, 2020, the U.S. debt exceeded $27 trillion. The COVID-19 pandemic added to the debt with the CARES Act and lower tax revenues. The U.S. debt-to-gross domestic product ratio rose to 127% by the end of Q3. That's much higher than the 77% tipping point recommended by the International Monetary Fund. In the middle of the greatest health and economic crisis in generations, millions of Americans have found themselves impoverished and disconnected from medical care. While the U.S. economy continues to stagger along, with unemployment claims increasing in early October, China's economy surged by 4.9% in the third quarter compared with the year earlier. The vigorous expansion of the Chinese economy, the New York Times explains, means that it is set to dominate global growth, accounting for at least 30% of the world's economic growth this year and in the years to come. Trump is certainly not listening to the scientists, at least not credible ones. The most important public health advisor in the White House is Scott Atlas, a neuroradiologist with no background in infectious disease or epidemiology. He has endeared himself to Trump by opposing the recommendations of the medical community and issuing Pollyanna-ish claims that echo Trump's insistence that we are rounding the turn. Actually, COVID-19 is raging out of control across most of the country. At this point, we can start to see more clearly why the nation has foundered so miserably. A failure of political leadership at all levels, a distrust of scientists, the media, and expertise in general, and deeply ingrained cultural attitudes about individuality and the values placed on life have all combined to result in a horrifically inadequate pandemic response compared to what are traditionally considered the U.S.'s peer nations. Rather than call for more testing capacity, Trump has indeed suggested that maybe the U.S. should be testing less.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests. If people don't know what's going on, we got tests. We got another one over here.
He has repeatedly and incorrectly blamed the recent increase in cases in the U.S. entirely on increased testing. While the U.S. is indeed running more tests than any other country, the percentage of those tests coming back positive increased from about 4.5% in mid-June to nearly 8% by August 12th, according to the COVID Tracking Project, suggesting the virus is spreading whether we test for it or not. By comparison, Germany's daily positivity rate is under 3%. In Italy, it's about 2%, and in New Zealand, it's under 0.5%. The unemployment rate increased from 3.5% in February to 14.7% in April 2020, representing a decline of more than 25 million people employed, plus another 8 million persons that exited the labor force. Job declines were focused on industries that rely on in-person interactions, such as retail, education, health services, leisure, and hospitality. For example, 8 of the 17 million leisure and hospitality jobs were lost in March and April 2020. Real, meaning inflation-adjusted consumer spending, fell 17% from February to April 2020 as social distancing reached its peak. In April, car and light truck sales were 49% below the late 2019 monthly average. Mortgage applications fell 30% in April 2020 versus April 2019. The unemployment rate was forecast to average 11.5% in 2020 and 9.3% in 2021. For many Americans right now, the scale of the coronavirus crisis calls to mind 9/11 or the 2008 financial crisis, events that reshape society in lasting ways, from how we travel and buy homes, to the level of security and surveillance we're accustomed to, and even to the language we use.